Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, we are back with another NFP in Real Life episode. And what are we talking about today, Kathleen?
Today, we are talking about chastity in marriage.
Oh my goodness.
It's a thing.
It is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Can I start by defining what chastity means to the world?
And I would love for you to do that.
Like, I'm just going to rip it to shreds. So I this morning just typed into Google chastity, and this is what came up. And it's a terrible, I'm just going to precursor this. It's a terrible definition. And then also please note that like on the Google search, you know how like pictures kind of show up on the right-hand side when you're like, yeah. So the pictures that show up are pictures of chastity belts. Just throwing that out there. Like this is the context of this definition. Chastity, noun, the state or practice of refraining from extramarital or especially from all sexual intercourse. Isn't that terrible?
It's pretty bad. Yeah.
That's such a bad definition.
I mean, does it cover the basics? Yeah, I guess so. But like, there's
not
little.
Even really. Like it says, especially refraining from all sexual intercourse. That's not chastity. Like
that's called abstinence. Yeah.
Like, can I throw something out here? We're gonna be throwing a lot of catechism, or I'm gonna be throwing a lot of catechism at you this morning. But there's just a quick quote I'm gonna throw out before we like really jump into the definition. The Catechism. It is written in the Catechism that the sexual relationship is demanded by the moral order in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So chastity does not mean not having sex.
Very true. Yeah.
That is a really important thing to start this episode with.
Just leave it to the Catechism to just truth bomb on all our definitions and all that kind of stuff, you know?
Oh my gosh. Like I cracked open the Catechism. I'm going to be honest, like 40 minutes ago, I was not prepared for this episode at all. And I was like, where do I start? Where should I start to prepare for this episode about chastity? And I went to my bookshelf and I pulled off 4 books. I pulled the Catechism, I pulled Love and Responsibility, I pulled Theology of the Body, and I pulled the Bible off. And I was like,
how much can I get from all of this?
Yeah, I have 40 minutes. Where's going to be the best part to start? And the only book that I'm going to read from is the Catechism, because that's so all I was able to get through. Now, I think in the future, we could do another episode on chastity after I've dived into like the other books that I pulled off.
Oh, I'm sure we could do like a 5-hour long episode on chastity after you've dove into all those other books.
But for now, I'm sticking to the Catechism because it literally blew my mind when I started like reading into this. So I just want to start because the Catechism has a great kind of like intro definition.
Yeah.
And then we can just kind of jump into like some of your personal experience and stuff, Kathleen.
Yeah.
So this is paragraph 2337. And it's the section title is the vocation to chastity, which I love that. The vocation.
Chastity. Yeah.
Like that. Oh, what a
that puts a totally different perspective on it.
Right. Yeah. So chastity means the successful integration of sexuality within the person and thus the inner unity of man in his bodily and spiritual being. Sexuality in which man's belonging to the bodily and biological world is expressed becomes personal and truly human when it is integrated into the relationship of one person to another in the complete and lifelong mutual gift of a man and a woman.
Mic drop.
So the Catechism is basically saying that like chastity is truly lived out in marriage.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we think of chastity as something you need before marriage, or something you need like if you're a celibate like priest or sister or just a consecrated virgin. Like, I think a lot of times, like, that's where our chastity radar goes, is we're like, oh, that's a not marriage thing.
Yeah.
The Catechism actually says it's really mostly fully lived out within a marriage. Like, whoa,
so interesting. Yeah.
Shut the front door.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that leads into like a lot of the thoughts that I have on it. Which for anyone that listened to like my first episode where like we, just kind of where
back in spring,
back in the spring. Yeah. Where I just did my 2021,
21.
Yeah, 21. What year is it?
What year it is.
I talked a little bit about this. It's kind of a big part of mine and my husband's marriage and our story and journey with NFP. It's a big part of it because, it became very, very personal, and we've talked a lot about it, but the lack of the preparation for chastity within marriage in young people, I mean, teenagers and 20-year-olds and like people, going through pre-Cana and everything. It did a lot of damage to our marriage for a few years. Because I think, it's a topic that young people need to be more, it needs to be more of a conversation with them, because I think we look at chastity as like this marriage, or really as the end goal of chastity, right? Like that's the finish line. Like I just have to be chaste up to this point, and then it's like, we're good to go, right? Like no holds bar. We're good.
So, oh my gosh, it's so wrong.
It is. And as I was really thinking about it in preparing for this episode, I realized that I think now, this is a message that should be shared with all young people, right? Like preparing for marriage or considering marriage, but particularly with young men, because for me, it feels like the damage that can be done in not being open about this and not talking about this with young men is sort of the opposite of the damage that can be done to women in regards to like the message of purity culture, right? Like it's this, with purity culture and women, it's this message of don't give yourself away, wait, sex is a no. You're better than that. You're too good for that, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden we get married and it's like, you just got to flip the switch. And it's like, well, how do I do that?
Which is so hard. I was a victim of like that exact problem.
Yeah. It's so hard to do. And all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, now I have to recognize myself as a sexual being. And my whole life, like I've had to suppress that, so it's like, well, what do I do now? Whereas with men, I think it's sort of switched, like the switch is on, right? Like as a teenager,
like, okay, I've been waiting for this. I am like ready.
Exactly. And they are just like, they're ready to go. But I mean, a lot of young men are out there who still wait for marriage. And they're just like, okay, I just got to make it to this point. Like, I want that like creme de la creme of sex. You know what I mean? I don't want what the world has to offer me. I want the good stuff. And when I get married, like, that's what it's going to be. My wife, she's going to want me. We're going to love each other. And it's just going to be sex. Right. But then all of a sudden, same thing. You get to that point, you have no real understanding of the context of married sex and everything that goes on in NFP and all this kind of stuff, if you are a couple that practices NFP. And then, you get there and it's just like, wait a minute, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And it builds a lot of resentment.
And I would argue that a lot of that comes from the incorrect, like the practice of something that isn't actually chastity.
Yes.
But we think it's chastity. And so like, if we go back to what I read, like sexuality, chastity is the successful integration of sexuality within the person. And it's the inner unity of man in his bodily and spiritual being. And I think like when chastity is approached like that Google search definition gave me,
right,
it's just approached as a suppression.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas the Catholic Church is saying, no, this is an integration.
Yeah.
Catechism point 2339 Oh my gosh. It's just, again, oh, this is so good.
Should we just read the whole catechism today?
Yeah. I think the episode should just be me reading paragraphs 2337 through 23. Oh wait, no, I could keep going.
Keep going.
2356, I think.
Wow.
But then I could keep going because 2357 is chastity and homosexuality, which we could get into that, but we're not going to in this episode. Anyway, all right, sorry. Let's get back to 2339. Chastity includes an apprenticeship in self-mastery, which is a training in, get this, human freedom.
Boom. Yeah.
The alternative is clear. Either man governs his passion and finds peace, which is what we want, or he lets himself be dominated by them and becomes unhappy.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I think that another thing I was thinking about is that this is obviously church teaching, and it's deep and it's beautiful and it's true. But I feel like even as the church tries to teach young people, we're sort of selling them short on what we think they can really understand and what they really want to hear. So I think that a lot of the times when we're trying to teach chastity or whatever it is to young people, it's a lot of like the approach we take to just trying to teach NFP for the first time at pre-Cana, which is you're just trying to sell it. Like you're just trying to convince them to do this, and you're doing it by making it sound like nice and, like, oh, well, you just gotta do this, but you can do it. And, but we're not giving them that really deep, true definition that's really points to an understanding of who they are as sons and daughters of Christ. Right. And as Christians and Catholics. Yeah, I just think that there's a big disservice sort of being done, that we're not giving them the fullness of truth because we're just trying to convince them in whatever way we feel will be like, palatable to them.
Yeah. Well, you bring up such a good point right here. But like, Kathleen, you and I were talking right before we started recording, we were talking about the catechism itself and how, like, when I first thought of the catechism, I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could read the catechism because it's just this big, huge book of like hofty or whatever that word is, lofty,
highfalutin, lofty
language that like, there's no way I could understand it. But as I have begun to like read sections of the catechism and actually use it as kind of like let me like look in the index for this word and then have my mind blown about it in like 30 minutes while I read it, which is what happened this morning.
That's exactly what happened.
I am realizing that the catechism is it's written in layman's terms. It is not like this lofty, hard to understand. You need to have a dictionary next to you while you're reading it. Like that's some of the writings of like the church fathers. Like, and that's for a different kind of, reader. Right.
Yeah.
But the catechism, I think we really can encourage our young people to crack open the catechism, and we can show them, and we can read these parts to them and have a great discussion. Like I would argue that any high schooler could have a discussion about, like I'm going to read another quote here. Man's dignity therefore requires him to act out of consciousness and free choice, as moved and drawn in a personal way from within, and not by blind impulses in himself or by mere external constraint. Okay, yeah, it's a little bit old school language there, right? Like it's a little bit, tiny bit lofty,
but it's not beyond them at all.
I don't think so. I think we could absolutely have a conversation about, free choice and how self-mastery is truly freedom.
Yeah.
Versus being guided and dominated by our passions and impulses. Like we can absolutely have a conversation about that.
I agree.
Instead of just suppressing it and saying, no, sex is for marriage, chastity means virginity. That's not what it means.
No. And I think that, I mean, I even look back, you know, I don't know. I look back to when I was in high school, and we weren't given that, you know, beautiful, you know, definition from the Catechism of chastity. We were given the, you know, you rip pieces of your heart and give it away to this person. You rip a piece of this.
My gosh, did you do that heart activity too?
Yes. Like, I think that's what I'm saying. Like, everybody
had
did
like
this
a red
really
piece of heart that I like ripped
just
apart.
like a paper heart, and they'd rip a piece off and give it to somebody, and rip a piece off and give it to somebody. Right. And
I also did the water balloon thing where you like poke a hole in the water balloon and like a little bit of water comes out and like your heart is like deflated each time that you like give yourself away.
We never did that one. No.
Yeah. But then like Jesus and chastity are the band-aids that like,
but
like your heart's never going to be whole again.
See, like,
isn't that terrible?
And it's terrible. That's a terrible message. You know, and that's what I'm saying is I think that coming, I don't know, into, you know, 2022 and this new, I think that our generation, honestly, you know, where in our late 20s, early 30s, we probably have seen that like we were not taught these things in the best way. And we would have benefited if it were taught to us really like more grounded in honest truth and things like the Catechism, you know what I mean? And so now it's kind of our job to take that to the next generation, to take those things that we feel like we were sort of deprived, and in ways that we realize we've struggled, like my husband and I, you know, again, we really struggled with resentment, because and you can go back and listen to my original episode where I kind of go into it, but his whole thing was, I believed what I was told when I was told that married sex is the creme de la creme and that it's worth holding out for.
Which that is true. That is
it absolutely is true. It absolutely is true. And that's the thing. None of this is not true.
It's just like
it's just base. Like, it's not getting into the depth and the real meaning of it all, right? Of what you're talking about with human dignity and the vocation to it, right? Like, it is a calling to chastity, and it's not going to be a calling for everybody for their entire lives, right? In marriages where we practice NFP, it's a calling for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
Well, but actually I'm going to get you on that.
Well, okay.
Let me throw this Catechism 2348.
Oh, shoot.
All the baptized are called to chastity.
Well, okay. And of course, but you know, but I mean, chastity is even really just being faithful, right? It's to your spouse, right? Like, that's chastity as well. But you know, in terms of like, if we're looking at it as like an abstinence piece of chastity.
Sure. Okay.
Right?
So if we're talking abstinence, cause I'm gonna like, once let's switch out chastity for abstinence and what you're about to say.
Yes.
Cause I want to come back at you with, well, like, I'm not fighting you, but like, I'm gonna
you
share
can fight me, bro. We can take this outside.
This morning. Good thing we're on a Zoom call and not sitting next to each other. All right. So yeah, go ahead. Continue what you're saying.
Yeah, no, but I mean, if we're looking at, you know, the abstinence piece of chastity, right? Then, you know, in a married relationship, you are called to that sometimes for like a week and a half to 2 weeks at a time. Right. And then of course, that's not all chastity, but, yeah, you know, but I like that the Catechism coined it as a vocation, because it is, I mean, it is a lifelong vocation, but then there's, you know, there's periods where it can look a little bit different, you know, because again, chastity before marriage, my husband said this when we kind of first were drawing all of this out during a really kind of rocky time in our relationship, you know, that he wished he was told as a teenager to practice chastity now, because that's exactly what it is practice, because it's a lot harder to practice chastity in marriage when sex is a licit thing than it is before marriage when it's just kind of not really licit. And I thought that was really eye-opening to me. It was like, yeah, that practicing it now before marriage is exactly that. It's practice, because like the Catechism said, chastity is really truly lived out in marriage, right? Like it's, how did it coin it, or how did it term it? It was so good.
About which
About
thing?
finding its fullness. It was like,
chastity. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So chastity means the successful integration of sexuality within the person, and thus the inner unity of man. Oh, wait, this is not the part you were asking about. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yes. Sexuality in which man's belonging to the body and biological world is expressed and becomes personal and truly human when it is integrated into the relationship of one person to another in the complete and lifelong mutual gift of man and woman. That's
exactly. Yeah. And I think that really, like, the way we're teaching chastity to young people, or at least the way that we were taught, hopefully people who are doing it today are doing it a lot differently.
And if they're not, like, that we need to step up.
Yeah, exactly. In the way that we were taught chastity was not even like the full definition of chastity. What we were being taught is abstinence. We weren't being taught chastity.
Right. Oh, that's such a good point. Yes.
Yeah. And so we were trying to be convinced of abstinence and not taught true chastity.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's bring this now back into kind of the context of marriage and like NFP. So you talked about like abstinence. And again, I think a lot of times we think of chastity, as abstinence. Like, oh, we only have to be chaste during like the time that we have to be abstinent. And
look, I just did it like 5 minutes ago, right?
Exactly. And it's so ingrained in our culture. Like, I don't blame you for saying it like that, because it's so ingrained. But that is not what the church teaches. That chastity is something we always have to practice. Here's another quote from the Catechism. This is this is actually a quote from St. Ambrose that's like quoted in the Catechism. There are 3 forms of the virtue of chastity. The first is that of spouses. The second is that of widows. And the third is that of virgins. We do not praise any one of them to the exclusion of others, except unfortunately we do. Unfortunately, we praise that of virgins. Yeah. Unfortunately. Sorry, St. Ambrose, we have failed you. And then he goes on to say, this is what makes for the richness of the discipline of the church. Woo. But okay, so here's another one. So chastity is a moral virtue. Sorry, this is 2, 3, 4, 5. Chastity is a moral virtue. It is also a gift from God, a grace, a fruit of spiritual effort. And then also, sorry, again, like my mind was blown. This is from a totally different section of the Catechism. This is point 1839. The moral virtues. So it said chastity is a moral virtue. The moral virtues grow through education, deliberate acts, and perseverance in struggle.
Yes.
And divine grace purifies and elevates them. So chastity is not meant to be something that we just learn. And actually that's another point. I'm not sure if I'm going to find it in there, but somewhere in what I read this morning, it's like, chastity is not something that's just attained and then like, check, I am chaste. It is something that you are constantly striving for. And again, if we go back to like what I was saying at the beginning, towards the beginning, like it's about overcoming our passions and gaining freedom. Also 2, 3, 4, 4, chastity presupposes the respect for the rights of the person. So when we are being chaste in our marital relationship, we are presupposing the rights, the dignity of our spouse. Offenses against chastity. So this is kind of a section after it nicely defines chastity for us. Offenses against chastity. The first one they list, point 2351, is lust. Lust is a disordered desire or an inornate enjoyment of sexual pleasure. But lust is a disordered desire, and we can absolutely lust over our spouse.
Yes.
And we can really do that, I think, during the times of abstinence, but I think we can do it anytime, right?
Yeah.
And we can put sex on this like pedestal that like like that pleasure of sex is what I want. But truly, that sexual union is that full gift of myself to my spouse.
Yeah.
Like without expecting to get anything back.
Right. Yeah.
Now, in a perfect and good and true sexual union, you are going to get something back and it's going to be fantastic. But you're supposed to go into that sexual encounter with your spouse.
Please.
You're supposed to go into that with, I am doing this as the ultimate, as the best gift that I can give my spouse right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give them my entire self, everything about me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be super vulnerable right now. And then, and I expect, and I should expect my spouse to then do the exact same thing. I expect my spouse to come completely freely, completely openly. Yeah. Totally. Now I'm just quoting Theology of the Body right now. Be total faithful.
Yeah.
But that mutual respect right there, that is part of chastity.
Yeah.
And that's what's built through, again, continuing to practice chastity. It's not a one and done thing. Another really cool point that I found too, and then I'll stop like on my soapbox and I'll let you talk. Sorry.
I mean, listen, you're on a roll.
Everyone, please go find a catechism. If you have a copy at home, great. If you don't, order one on Amazon. If you can't afford it, email me. I will order you a copy of the catechism. It is this important. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 7. The virtue of chastity blossoms in friendship. Friendship. Okay. It shows the disciple how to follow and imitate him who has chosen us as friends. Who's that? Jesus Christ. The Christian has to put on Christ, who is the model for all chastity. I just jumped over to a different point. I jumped over to 2, 3, 4, 8. Sorry. I'm going back to 2, 3, 4, 7 now. So imitate him who has chosen us as his friends, who has given himself totally to us and allows us to participate in his divine estate. Chastity is a promise of immortality. I was like, immorality. Whoa.
It's funny because I knew the word that you meant. And so I took it as that, but then I like thought for a second. I was like, oh wait, did she say immorality?
Immortality, everyone. I'm so sorry.
Oh man, that's great.
Okay. But yeah, so this point continues. Chastity is expressed notably in friendship with one's neighbor, whether it develops between persons of the same or opposite sex. Friendship represents a great good for all, and it leads to spiritual communion. That point, totally blew out of I had no idea.
Yeah.
That chastity, we're called to chastity in every relationship that we have.
Yeah.
Like chastity is modeling Christ. Christ was truly chaste. All of Christ's faithful are called to lead a chaste life in keeping with their particular states of life. At the moment of his baptism, the Christian is pledged to lead his effective life in chastity.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
This is what I'm saying. Like how much does this differ from the chastity that we were taught, you know?
Yeah.
And again, why aren't we going to the catechism? Why aren't we going into this, into this depth with young people? It's what we need to do. Yeah. For any youth ministers,
they can handle it.
They absolutely can. Any youth ministers that might be listening, please. This is a challenge that we have for you. Really understand and not even this is what young people want. Now more than ever, I think we're something so lost, deep and true. And we're so lost in who we even are. I mean, we don't even know, our gender anymore. It's like we're so lost in what we are and in whose we are. that we need this depth
Mm-hmm.
to tell them and to really like make them believe the truth about themselves and to understand the truth about themselves, not even just believe it, but to understand it. So yeah, any youth ministers out there, please pull out the catechism with your young people, and please don't teach chastity like we were taught chastity, because it was awful and it didn't do the job.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, this is what we need. This reveals so much about the human person.
And a call to those of you who are married or engaged or dating, anybody, any of you who are listening right now.
Yeah. Anybody.
Like with your, who has a significant other, like with your significant other, grab out the catechism, read through these points on chastity and have a discussion about it. Because I had never read them before this morning. And my mind is just reeling.
Yeah.
And I only shared like a tiny part of the amount that I underlined in my copy of the catechism over here, like a tiny amount in this episode. And we need to wrap up pretty soon here. But I really want to encourage you all to take this section of the catechism and really discuss it with your spouse or your future spouse or your boyfriend. And just like come to that understanding together of what truly the church teaches as chastity. And don't be afraid to admit that what you thought chastity was before you read these points in the catechism was totally wrong, because I will admit that right now.
100%.
And so, just don't.
This could be a great phase 2 date night idea.
Ooh, fabulous.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
Pull out the catechism, a bottle of wine if you want to. If it's too tempting, then maybe don't. But and the catechism, and really read through this together. I mean, honestly, that could be a really cool thing.
It really could. Yeah. I think I'm going to do this with my husband in a couple of days. Like seriously,
I'm pregnant. So we got a while before phase 2, but
well, I'm postpartum. So like we basically have perpetual phase 2. So
there you go. Exactly. It's a good time. Yeah.
Oh man. Kathleen, did you want to mention anything else like before we?
No, I think the catechism.
The catechism. Really, it was not me. It was the catechism.
Yeah. It really,
catechism brought it today.
Laid the groundwork today. Yeah. It brought the hard truths. And it did the job.
Fabulous. All right. Yeah. Well, be sure to follow us on Instagram if you aren't already. If you have questions or comments, or seriously, if you can't afford a copy of the catechism, email me. I will make it happen.
I'll cover a copy too.
Yeah.
I can't not cover a copy after you offer to cover a copy.
All right. We will see you next time.
Bye, guys.